Metal Detector Maniac is the Farley Roxburgh joint suspense thriller comedy musical that more and more are describing as the #1 film of 2021. Its titular metal detectorist, Art Wiedenhauer, is a psychopath capable of all manner of villainy, stalking, kidnapping, breaking and entering, blackmail, and murder. Wiedenhauer is a pompous poet whose self-published poems reveal not only his latent maniacism, but also his fatal fascination with twins, a vital clue pointing towards his imprisonment of the feisty McAfee twins. Elsewhere, we have discussed real-life artist Matt Farley's permeating obsession with twins, and here that obsession permeates the film itself. Much as Wiedenhauer is himself a fictionalized twin of Farley's, so too is the fictionalized Farley of this film a counterpart of Wiedenhauer. Both men are self-published artists who partner with local store owners to hawk their wares. Both men are disillusioned academics appended with the moniker of Odd Duck. Both men descend into a spiral of perilous paranoia. The Farley-Roxburgh filmmaking duo seems desperate for us to interpret the story through this lens of duality. But they already made that picture, my friends, my colleagues. It was called Heard She Got Married, and it was quite good, as we know. Their Gymnian insistence here is but one of their patented misdirects. Just as prevalent as the references to twins in Metal Detector Maniac are the instances of characters correcting others on mistaken dyads. When Tom Scalzo references three-legged races to the co-ed jogger, Farley corrects him that it would be, in fact, a four-legged race because there are actually three people rather than the traditional two. When Farley insists to Officer McHugh that he has only 2 strikes, not yet the requisite 3 to violate the 3 strikes policy, McHugh gives the final word that he is indeed out and hangs up on him forthwith. When Farley first refers to their tete-a-tete with Wiedenhauer as a mano-a-mano, Scalzo corrects him to refer to it as a mano-y duo, 1 against 2. Scalzo further suggests it to be a duo-y duo, doubling the twins in effect, by including Rosie the Fence on Wiedenhauer's team. But Farley dismisses the suggestion, as Rosie is just a Hessian, a disinterested mercenary who will side with the highest bidder. 3 is the important number. 3 is the number of completeness. Just like the 3 plain-clothed officers who show up to take Moes Haven's simple report at the beginning of the film, where 1 would have sufficed. And the 3 undercover homicide detectives who show up at the end of the film to arrest the band. Metal Detector Maniac is not a tale of dualism, but rather a tale of triads. Wiedenhauer is opposed not by Farley, but by Farley and Scalzo, after all. But if there are 3, there can be no simple complementary interpretations vis-a-vis mirroring, light versus dark, the yin and the yang. We must take a different tack entirely, I am afraid. The Dark Triad, coined by Delroy L. Paulhus and Kevin M. Williams in 2002. The Dark Triad refers to a set of 3 somewhat overlapping non-pathological personality types, potent predictors of destructive malevolences. These are, of course, psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. The first and perhaps darkest of the 3 is psychopathy. Persistent antisocial behavior and a lack of empathy, selfishness, remorselessness, disregard for one's fellow man. Art Wiedenhauer is the prototypical psychopath. He has imprisoned the feisty McAfee twins in his basement dungeon for 5 years, subjected them to his many obsessions. He pays Rosie the Fence to accompany him to social situations to mask with her femininity his cold and off-putting demeanor. He hides a switchblade knife in his metal detector and pockets a poisoned candy bar because he is a violent, paranoid potential killer. Wiedenhauer also exhibits narcissism, with his grandiosity and pomposity. But the film's true paragon of this trait is Matt Farley. His fixation on becoming a savior, in the song Occam's Razor, spiting a long-dead monk for daring to imply he cannot do so. His extreme umbrage at being criticized by the sabbatical committee, as in licensed and bonded, resenting any higher authority that might deign to approve or disapprove of his actions. His ever-present hyperbolic self-importance. He attributes an unbroken candy bar in a corpse's pocket to his nemesis, showing a final recognition and tribute to his worthiness and triumph, in contrast to his compatriot Tom Scalzo, who wears a Moes Haven t-shirt to their concert. Farley wears a t-shirt with his own face alone upon it. Farley is perfectly willing to exude his sense of grandiosity unto his partner in Moes Haven as well, but he can never allow them to be equals. He is perpetually insistent that he contributes 60% to Scalzo's 40%. And finally, 2018 study by Giacomin and Rule found that narcissists can be recognized by their distinctive eyebrows. Wiedenhauer, too, is a Machiavellian schemer, blackmailing Councilman Kevin McGee about his medallion usurpation as leverage to defeat the proposed loitering law so that he, Wiedenhauer, can continue his metal detectorism and hour-long meditations on Agony Ridge every sunrise. Farley, on the other hand, is too self-absorbed, guileless, and impulsive for effective strategy. However, the true Machiavellian manipulator has been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
Right, the end justifies the means.
One Tom Scalzo. Scalzo comes off as a calm, coolly collected straightman to Farley's odd duck antics, where Farley will speak before knowing if his words make any sense. Scalzo is more thoughtful and deliberate with his words. But watch him more closely. He is calculating.
Not all in this life is easily apparent.
He silently studies the other characters, feeling their vibes, if you will. Contrast him with Farley during the sabbatical committee meetings. Farley is rambunctious, speaks without thought, repeatedly offending the sensibilities of the committee members, whose approval he very much needs. Scalzo, on the other hand, adjusts his approaches to try to win allies on the committee, agreeing to adapt one member's poetry as song lyrics, expressing his respect for another's lutery. But the contrast betwixt two facets of Moes Haven goes deeper than mere levels of thoughtfulness. In this long-running partnership, Scalzo has become intimately familiar with Farley's proclivities, and he clearly manipulates him throughout the story. Scalzo frequently, with surgically placed comments, instigates Farley into his deranged diatribes and feeds his paranoia. Furthermore, Farley, as I have said, is entirely self-absorbed. Scalzo is the one venturing into the outside world, performing reconnaissance patrols in his car, contacting private investigators, researching in the library, etc., etc. And as a result of this dichotomy, Scalzo becomes the sole curator of Farley's experiences and inspirations. After the concert, there is a brief and quiet scene of Scalzo hockeying the floor alone. It is immediately followed by a scene of Farley and Scalzo unloading the equipment from the car in Farley's garage, where Farley worries that they forgot to hockey after the show. Scalzo reassures him otherwise. Now, the only purpose of this sequence is to indicate to the audience that Farley is unaware and unconcerned with Scalzo's exploits. Why do the filmmakers need to do this? By my reckoning, there are two reasons. The first, to demonstrate that Scalzo is the more thoughtful, deliberate, and responsible of the duo, covering their tracks, if you will. The second, because Scalzo has a number of other, even more secretive machinations. Following the murder of the metal detector maniac, Art Wiedenhauer, Matt Farley makes an idle suggestion.
Should we frame Rosie the Fence for it?
I question our ability to pull off a successful framing.
Alright, yeah, we'll keep her out of it.
But does he? Indeed, has he already pulled off such a framing? Is he covering his own tracks by dissuading Farley from this pursuit and hiding his own well-honed ability? The answer is yes, he is covering his tracks. Yes, he has successfully framed someone. He is Tom Scalzo, Machiavellian mastermind. Consider the early scene in Matt Farley's basement. Tom Scalzo knocks on the window. He has a newspaper to offer Farley as curated inspiration. But the door is locked, so he needs Farley to let him in. Now, in a later scene in Farley's basement, Farley is at his piano when Scalzo descends the staircase with a package that was waiting on the outside doorstep. A package containing Wiedenhauer's book of poetry, Gemini Forever, which simultaneously titillates and alarms Farley. It is yet more Scalzo-curated inspiration for their music, but it also reveals that the metal detector maniac has his address, heightening his paranoia. As the duo compose and perform the haunting song, He Knows Where I Live, it is now Farley's wife, Elizabeth, who comes knocking at the window, finding herself locked out of the house. It seems someone has stolen the hidden spare key. Had the door been unlocked until Scalzo entered and locked it behind himself on the way in? Or was the door locked until Scalzo stole the key and entered? The earlier scene with Scalzo locked out would suggest the latter. Afterwards, as Farley pontificates on the folly of people leaving spare keys outside their houses and being susceptible to bad guys, Scalzo at first pleads with him to...
Man, leave me out of this one.
But soon thereafter deliberately suggests that a metal detectorist would easily have found the hidden key, using the occasion to again exacerbate Farley's paranoia. Now, later, after Wiedenhauer is dead, Scalzo curates the contents of his pockets as Farley stands nearby pontificating again, self-absorbed and only half paying attention. What does Scalzo find but a skeleton key, further vindicating Farley's paranoia. If we grant that Scalzo did not plant it himself, Wiedenhauer would have had no reason to steal Farley's house key. He had the only key he would ever need. Scalzo is the one who formulates the final plan to murder Art Wiedenhauer by pushing him off the cliff. In the film, he does this when Farley is at the end of his rope, having called the police in vain after finding a butcher knife with a threatening note inside his basement. However, in the accompanying Moes Haven album, Metal Detector Maniac, Tom Scalzo, as vocalist, sings of premeditating this murder much earlier in the chronology of the story. He imagines Wiedenhauer's death in the song Rosie as a prerequisite to winning Rosie's affections, and he specifically imagines pushing Wiedenhauer off a cliff in Moral Dilemma. Both of these songs precede the escalations of Running Scared and He's On To Us, much less the alleged murder of Skizzy in Ode to Skizzy, which was performed at their concert and before the final apex of Farley's paranoia. In fact, when Scalzo at last convinces Farley to murder Wiedenhauer, he begins by saying,
Is the time nigh for us to take action?
He has clearly been waiting for this eventuality.
Push him off Agony Ridge at sunrise.
So, what then precipitated Farley's willingness to murder? To review, Wiedenhauer knows where Farley lives due to Farley ordering his poetry book at Scalzo's instigation. Farley believes Wiedenhauer can enter his house at a whim due to the missing key, which we have established was most probably Scalzo's doing. Then their friend Skizzy turns up dead. Farley and Scalzo blame Wiedenhauer, but the death of a fellow person, even a friend, isn't enough to inspire a supreme narcissist into action. That requires a direct threat to the narcissist. The final straw for Farley is the aforementioned butcher knife and threatening note. Farley and Scalzo are in Farley's basement. Farley is performing an emotional song he has written about a one-on-one basketball game that he lost to Scalzo under protest. Because of course, how could a narcissist ever legitimately lose a basketball game? Scalzo is ultimately unimpressed with the song and suggests they need to go bigger with the next song, pointing to Wiedenhauer's book of poems for more inspiration. It is only then that Farley finds the knife and the threatening note. Yet another important revelation that is curated by Scalzo. He then departs, leaving Farley to stew in his boiling over paranoiac fear. The next time they speak, Scalzo will be the one to suggest
Let's
killing
push him off Agony
Wiedenhauer.
Ridge at sunrise.
But what do we know about this book of poems, this Jiminy Forever? Scalzo brought it into the basement in the unopened package. It has been sitting next to Farley's piano ever since, only to be used for occasional inspiration when the duo were stuck. Yet Scalzo is intimately familiar with the poems contained therein. He reveals this when he earlier convinces Farley to join him in creeping around Agony Ridge at dawn to get inside Wiedenhauer's mind, thereby profiling him. Scalzo's profiling is far more complete than any of us could ever dream, successfully sniffing out Wiedenhauer's poisoned candy bar trap in the end. Unless Scalzo bought his own surreptitious copy of the book, he has been accessing it when Farley's attentions are diverted. Perhaps he has been entering the basement alone, perhaps with the stolen key, or with the skeleton key that he later allegedly found in Wiedenhauer's pocket. In any case, he is the one who guided Farley into finding the knife and the note. A note, including block letters. eerily resembling the bubble letters in Scalzo's doodling during the committee meeting. But let us at last consider the larger inciting event, which also coincidentally inspired the centerpiece crowd pleaser of Moes Haven's concert, Ode to Skizzy. I refer, of course, to the death of Skizzy. The characters are convinced that Wiedenhauer probably killed Skizzy. But what is their evidence? Because while all of their other hunches are always explicitly vindicated, this one is not. The McAfee twins, who otherwise know all about Wiedenhauer's movements, obsessions, and plans, are completely unaware that Skizzy is even dead. Skizzy is something of a vagrant who lurks behind a fence and tries to convince passers-by to piss with him in the river and go for junior beef sandwiches. When the river is frozen over and he can no longer piss into it, he enjoys ice skating instead. These things he tells all whom he encounters, with one notable exception: Art Wiedenhauer. For the longest time, Art Wiedenhauer would not even stop to talk with Skizzy. When at last he did, he apparently only ranted about his distaste for the Moeshaven duo. Since Farley and Scalzo had been friendly with Skizzy, Skizzy disbelieved Wiedenhauer's slanders against them and vowed that the next time he saw Wiedenhauer, he would follow him detective style. After that declaration, Skizzy died, drowning apparently after attempting to go for his first skate of the season. Upon learning of Skizzy's death, Scalzo plants the seed of suspicion, noting how Skizzy had tragically gone from being excited about investigating Wiedenhauer to drowning in the river. Now, Skizzy's death is suspicious because Skizzy had told Farley and Scalzo that he would only retrieve his ice skates from Rosie's pawn shop when the police demonstrated the ice was thick enough by driving onto the reservoir. However, the duo finds Skizzy's ice skates still in Rosie's inventory. More precisely, Scalzo finds these skates. He walks directly over to them after finishing an unrelated conversation and points them out to Farley. Afterwards, Farley and Scalzo discuss Skizzy in the alleyway outside the shop. Scalzo reminds Farley that one of the last things Skizzy told them was his intent to tail Wiedenhauer, which is true. However, he specifically says one of. What else was amongst Skizzy's final communique with Moeshaven? Scalzo asked him to explain his fascination with pissing in the river, getting into his mind as Scalzo tends to do. Skizzy obliged and ended by suggesting that they try pissing in the river sometime as well, and Scalzo concludes by saying that,
Maybe we will, Skizzy. Maybe we will.
That is the finale of their interaction with Skizzy, Scalzo promising to join him in pissing in the river. The river is Skizzy's domain. If he had been following Wiedenhauer, he would surely have ended up on Agony Ridge. Wiedenhauer, by all accounts, never discussed with Skizzy his predilection for the river. Scalzo murdered Skizzy. Scalzo accepted his invitation for a river piss and drowned him. After Skizzy's declaration of intent to tail Wiedenhauer and his anticipation of the coming freeze, Scalzo saw the perfect opportunity to frame Wiedenhauer for a murder to further goad Farley towards killing him. But why? What are Scalzo's motives? As a musician and founding member of Moeshaven, he is certainly trying to make the best possible art during his and Farley's sabbatical. Farley's approach is aimless and uncompromising, whilst Scalzo is more practical. As noted, he accepts Professor Rusby's poem to secure her support on the committee. He knows the album needs to achieve greatness to vindicate their sabbatical, and he decides to manipulate events for a satisfying narrative arc. If one listens to the finished album, the song "She's Less Scared of Him Than She Is of Us" reveals this angle. Farley ends his part of the vocal lamenting that they have done all they can by warning the jogger about the metal detector maniac, and that if she doesn't heed their warning, her demise is not on them. The song up to that point is good, it's serviceable, but then it gets a second wind and becomes great when Scalzo starts singing his part, which refutes Farley's finality and asserts that they are prepared to fight he who hides in plain sight. It's an exciting and dramatic turn. The conflict with Wiedenhauer is essential for the album's success, and Scalzo recognizes that he needs to continually escalate it from a playful skirmish into the eventual all-out war. He follows up that song with his research into Wiedenhauer's past in order to progress the plot. Beyond that, the song "Rosie" reveals a spark of infatuation between Scalzo and the titular Rosie, and his apparent jealousy of both Wiedenhauer and Farley. Wiedenhauer is an obstacle to Rosie becoming the Sacagawea to Moes, Havens, Lewis, and Clark, and Scalzo declares that Rosie can call him an odd duck at any hour. But note that she only called Wiedenhauer and Farley odd ducks, never Scalzo. A lyrical nod to Scalzo's own wounded ego and secret narcissism. Indeed, by the end of the film, both Farley and Scalzo have wholeheartedly adopted Wiedenhauer's psychopathy, having no regrets for his premeditated murder. They have both indulged themselves with Farley's narcissism, reveling in their newfound statuses as saviors, martyrs, and folk heroes. Their song, Jailhouse Blues, cites their acceptance of Niccolo Machiavelli's ethos, but only Scalzo has exhibited the wherewithal to truly implement it with his unparalleled cunning. Tom Scalzo has evolved into the ultimate culmination of the Dark Triad, a fully realized villain worthy of mention in the annals of cinema alongside the Harry Powells, the Nurse Ratchets, the Hannibal Lecters, and that weird kid from the Children of the Corn. Thank you.
Well, he's an odd duck. Quack, 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 quack. 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 He's an odd duck. Quack, quack, quack. He's an odd duck. Quack, quack, quack. He's an odd duck. Quack, 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 quack, quack. He's an odd duck. Quack, quack, quack. He's an odd duck. Quack, 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 quack. He's an odd duck. Quack, 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 quack. He's an odd duck.